We still stay with the president because in February last year, during the State of the Nation address, he promised to use all necessary means to end political vigilantism. His comment came a few weeks after a by-election at Ayawaso West Wuogon turned violent, leaving several people injured. Speaking on the issue, the president directed then for the two major political parties to meet and find solution to it. Listen first to the president at the 2019 State of the Nation address.
Speaker, 3 months ago, a member of this honorable House and the representative of Ayawaso West constituency, the West Wuogon constituency, died suddenly, throwing all of us into mourning. On 31st January, 3 weeks ago exactly, a by-election was called to elect a replacement for the late Emmanuel Chiramatin Ejako. May his soul rest in perfect peace. During the course of that morning, some events took place in that constituency which led to an uproar in the country. My first instinct was to let the police do their investigations and then prosecute if they found evidence of criminality. The narration that this was another incident of, quote, normal by-election violence, unquote, caused me to expand my response. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, recent by-elections in Akwatia, Etiwa, Chereponi, Tanansi, and Amenfi West have been marked with violence, and some people still have their physical and emotional scars to show for it. I could have sat it out, as some did for Akwatia, Etiwa, Chereponi, Tanansi, and Amenfi West, but I decided that that will not be the interest of Ghanaian democracy. The time has come to put an end to the phenomenon of politically related violence. The only way in our system to begin to deal with such a situation is through the work of a commission of inquiry. Thankfully, I got 4 responsible Ghanaians of independent spirit who agreed to serve on the commission. I hope the findings and recommendations of the Emile Short Commission will enable us chart a path to ending politically related violence in our country. The events of last Monday in Kumasi, where a meeting of the national regional executives of the opposition National Democratic Congress was broken up by acts of violence, leading to the tragic death of a citizen, have reinforced the urgent need for us to find that path. I want to use the platform of this message to make a sincere, passionate appeal to the leaders of the two main political parties in our country, MPP and NDC, to come together as soon as possible, preferably next week, to agree on appropriate measures to bring an end to this worrying and unacceptable phenomenon of vigilantism in our body politic. Mr. Speaker, I have asked the leadership of the MPP to extend an invitation to the leadership of the NDC for such a meeting. The security services of the country will be on standby to assist this meeting. If voluntary disbandment by the parties is not feasible, then I will initiate legislation in the matter.
Well, following that, the Peace Council started a mediation effort with the two major political parties. The National Democratic Congress has refused, as you may know, to sign the final roadmap to ending political vigilantism in the country, according to the party. The working document on the roadmap is incomplete and called for more stakeholder consultations for better outcomes. The opposition party took the decision at a ceremony to endorse the final document earlier this month. Let's take a listen to the NDC's Alex Sebefia explain their position.
We do not think we have exhausted all the possible issues that are required to have a meaningful document that we can all work to. The reason we say so is that when you look at the roadmap, it has 22 recommendations. 4 of those recommendations relate to political parties. 18 of the recommendations belong to others, namely the government, NCCE, civil service organizations, electoral commission, etc. None of these are signatories to the document we are going to sign. So in effect, if you look at the communiques we have already signed with the Peace Council, they actually already cover the 4 items that are directly related to the political parties.
Well, we are in an election year and this conversation has become critical. What has changed on the ground after Ayawaso West walk-on by election? I've been joined by the Executive Director of the West African Network for Peace Building, Chukwuemeka. Welcome to you. First of all, the President kept his promise made last year and put before Parliament the appropriate legislation to end political vigilantism. I've got to ask you, what has changed on the ground?
Well, I think that there are probably more than one aspect to ending political vigilantism in Ghana. Of course, I think that in addressing the issue, the most important aspects have been done, which is number one, acknowledging that there is a problem and acknowledging what the problem is doing to undermine the political gains and the democratic credentials of Ghana. The second thing, in my opinion, is the political will to deal with the issues and to also identify the key actors and stakeholders that will contribute to dealing with the issue. I think to a large extent, those 2 aspects have been done. And thankfully, the President has signed an act into law that now bans vigilantism in Ghana. But I think it goes beyond that. Number one is that there is need to continue to dialogue and discuss the concerns that has been raised by the NDC as to why they are not signing the implementation plan, which is the soft approach to ending the vigilantism. The President signing of this law, signing into law the Act of Parliament, is a hardcore approach, which looks at punitive measures if you continue to engage in vigilantism. But there are other issues around that. The critical question to ask, which in my opinion is foundational, is why in the first place did we have vigilantism? So those issues, those concerns, those fears also need to be addressed within the spectrum of trying to end vigilantism. So I think they are processes rather than an event.
And I remember at the time when the conversation was up, particularly after the by-election violence, Dr. Kwesi Enin had disclosed that there were about 20 groups active across the country. With the refusal of the NDC to sign this piece of document, what does it say about the other groups that we probably have around active?
Well, like I said, there is need to continue to discuss the reasons behind the refusal of the NDC. I think that there are issues or concerns they have raised that probably need to be listened to. However, that does not also undermine what the law currently stipulates, which is that it has become illegal for anybody to engage in that act. But in my opinion, it goes just beyond the law. There is need to re-engage those actors who are actually engaged in acts of vigilantism and to address the concerns and the fears to why political parties are not yet interested in disbanding. Because the point I'm trying to make is that whether they are 10, whether they are 20 at the moment, if appropriate measures to address the reason behind why in the first place we had disbanding is not put in place, then we might even have more groups than talking about disbanding the existing ones.
So can we get into what measures and who should be acting?
For example, I have made my opinion that it's important to link this approach to the business sector, for example, the private sector and the development partners in Ghana. How do we re-engage those who are involved? Because they are engaged for so many reasons, which part of it is economic reasons, for daily bread. And you cannot just tell them to go away. They probably stop operating as vigilante groups, but also engage in other societal issues that could affect the public. So that's number one. So those who are engaged need to be reassured that, number one, they are not going to be arrested and prosecuted. Number two is that there is an alternative means of livelihood, right? Then the second thing is to put in place the capacity of the police to regain the confidence of the public, including the politicians, that they are going to process everybody equally. Once people are convinced and have confidence in the state security institutions to protect everybody equally, then there will be no need to use alternative measures. So it's also important, especially in an election year, that both the ruling party and the opposition have the same measure of confidence in the police to protect them equally. And then, of course, some of the concerns that have been raised by the National Democratic Party need to be dialogue on. What are their fears? What are their concerns? Those issues need to be addressed.
And we're in an election year already. Do we have enough time to have this conversation with all the other things happening?
In my opinion, I think that what is important in a dialogue process is the willingness to talk. And I think that the two political parties have shown the willingness to discuss. The method of the dialogue may need to be re-evaluated, and people need to be re-engaged on what do they agree, what do they disagree on. We begin with the ones they agree on, and then we can move into the ones they do not disagree on, they disagree on. And in this wise, I think that sometimes if we have the right atmosphere, even 1 hour is enough for a dialogue process to take place.
And ahead of the President's State of the Nation, what are your expectations in terms of security in Ghana?
I'm thinking that the President needs to reassure the citizenry of his posture with regards to the current security challenges, not just in Ghana, but the threat that is posed by the neighboring countries, as it were. That's number one. Number two is that he also needs to further reassure everybody about the political will to allow the state agencies to do their work professionally. And then I'm talking here more particularly about the police, the election management bodies, the judiciary, and so on and so forth. Then, of course, look into the long term as it relates to the sustainable development goals and how fast Ghana is going to address those key issues, those 17 key issues, to ensure that the country's prosperity is in the right direction.
And again, particularly because of the period that we're in, I wonder exactly what he can say to convince all citizens, and particularly the political parties, opposition political parties, that the police in particular will be independent.
Well, I think it's also about the actions of the state. And I think so far, in my opinion, so good in terms of how the police have carried themselves and other security agencies. It's not just about what the president says, but about what happens on the ground. And I think I'm not sure that if you put a scale in terms of the fears and concerns raised by the citizenry, that lack of professionalism within the rank and file of the police is a major issue. So I think it's about how the police continue to do their work professionally and ensure that they continue to have the confidence of the citizens.
Mr. Eze, we'll leave it here. We'll speak again after the President delivers the State of the Nation address tomorrow, so we can do some analysis. That's Executive Director of the West African Network for Peace Building, Chukwuemeka Eze.